Okay, so good morning, France and Europe, and good afternoon to those who connect from Singapore and Asia. I'm Aude Simon, Head of Business Development at the French Chamber of Commerce in Singapore. And I'm delighted to welcome you and our speakers today to this webinar dedicated to the agri-food industry in Southeast Asia and Singapore. So for your information, this webinar is jointly organized with the Economic Development Board of Singapore. So please let me briefly introduce you our distinguished speakers and the agenda of the day. So our first speaker, Wendy Cheng Petit, is our agrotech expert at the French Chamber of Commerce in Singapore, and she will give us today some insights about Southeast Asia's agri-food landscape. Our second speaker, Jacqueline Zhang, is Regional Director Europe at Singapore Economic Development Board, and she's based in Paris. She will be presenting Singapore's agri-food industry and its innovative ecosystem. And last but not least, our third speaker today is Damien Pierre Lesault, Head of Global Technical Developers at Rocket in Singapore. So for those who don't know, Rocket is a global leader in innovative plant-based ingredients with a worldwide presence. And Damien Pierre will be sharing with us the potential of plant proteins and fiber, as well as Rocket's innovative solutions in food application. For your information, so there will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentations. So please use the toolbox to ask the questions you may have. And please be informed that this webinar will be recorded and the replay will be available on our website in the next few days. So now I would like to invite Wendy to give us her presentation. Wendy, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Aude. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So I will present two parts here. The first part is about, French Chamber of Commerce. So very quickly, French Chamber of Commerce is established in 1979, more than 40 years ago. So, it's part of a very strong network of French Chamber all around the world. So more than 92 countries with 33,000 companies. And it was actually established by companies to give service to the companies. So this is a very, we are a very good platform, to promote, an ecosystem between, business development between France and Singapore. And our aim is actually to, to help French companies to develop their business here in Singapore. I'll talk more later about, our business activities. So we go on to the next page. Next page, we have here, we are very, very strong in the Singapore business community. And I've also heard that, the French Chamber is very active. Wow, you make so many events. So here you are, we organize more than 200 events a year. But of course, at this moment, it's everything is virtual, mostly. And we have more than 7,000 people attending and, 600 companies, 6,000 contacts. So in various sectors, as you can see on this slide. Next page. What we do also is not just to organize, events, but we are here actually to help French companies. So here you can see there is a logo. Team France Export is a French government initiative which was launched in 2019 to help French companies to go international. So we are very honored to be selected by the French government to represent to represent Singapore. And what we do is that, we help French companies to, to do business connections, to do business studies, and to help them participate in French pavilions. And on the other side, we do have Le Booster. So, is there, to provide, A to Z, services like company setup, work permits, and plus we do have a, office, for rental as well. And we also do recruitment. So we help, to recruit, French candidates or Singapore candidates, for the companies are based here. Okay, so next page. So now I think that that is the most exciting part. So what about, the agri-food, industry in ASEAN? So as you can see, ASEAN is very wide. So it's the third most dynamic region in the world. And as you can see, there are 10, territories, and they are all in a different, very stage of, development. And you have like Singapore, which is, in a very highly developed, stage with the highest like GDP, per habitant. And then whereas you can go as low as, like Myanmar and Laos, which is very low. But if you look at this region in the whole, it's a very exciting area. Why? Because we have 650 million people living in this region. And if you compare to the whole of Europe, it's more than 700 million. So it's really a big kind of like a consumer market, for the French companies. And it contributes nearly to 6% global GDP. And there's also a very interesting thing to note about is that Europe country is aging, whereas Asian, we are still growing. So therefore, there is still a demand, for products here. And there's also another thing to note is that there is a growth of middle-class consumers. And if you talk about the middle-class consumers in 2010, there were 172 million people. But now with a forecast in 2030, is going to grow to 454 million. So it's, times more than two times, the potential market, for the products. And there is also an emergence of very wealthy people, estimated at 40 million. So that is a big number. Okay, so next. So this is a summary of what are the global issues and trends that we see in Asian. So as you can see, Asian, it's still rapidly urbanizing. I think that, there is a forecast that by 2030, more than 90 million, they are forecast to move to ASEAN cities. But of course, exception is Singapore. We are already 100%, urbanized. And as I said earlier on, there is a growth of the, consumer class. They are expected to double to, 170 million households in ASEAN. And, with this, urbanization, with the growing consumer class, so what do we have? We have demand. So we have growing demands. So the growing demands, which means that, there is a facing, like, we have challenges in supply. So supply, why is there a challenge? Because actually, if you look at the last issue, arable land in ASEAN is a big issue here compared to US, compared to Europe, because the region's yield is not so good. The farms here in ASEAN is very small. So yes, it's low availability of arable lands, and the yields are not so good. What we can also see is that actually there is also food waste here in ASEAN. So globally, about 30% of the food is wasted. So this is an issue that we have here as well in the ASEAN region. So yeah, and in terms of food security, this is also an important issue for the ASEAN and Oceania region. So the food production is expected to increase by 77% by 2050 to meet, the needs of these people. So yeah, so there, there is quite a number of issues that, we can see here. And of course, there is an aging population as well. I think particularly for Singapore, healthy eating and premiumization. So let's go on to the next slide, please. Okay, so what you can see here is that we have the trends, and now you have seen all the issues that Asian region is facing. So I'd like to list out a few sticks and trends that we see to overcome these issues. So the first of all is the traditional agriculture would no longer work in face of increasing demands and population. So hence we need intelligent and computer work here to increase the production. So in terms of the innovation, the agriculture sector has seen very little development over the past 30 years in ASEAN, particularly. But there's a rise of, technologies like, which I'm going to cite here, is going to definitely to help to modernize it. So we were talking about, the farms being computerized, having a good production management software, to help to increase the yield, making optimization, the way of like production, and having, some robots, in the agricultural field, and having, production being digitalized, usage of drones, satellites, artificial intelligence, etc. And interestingly, we are also taking a note that there is an increasing a trend of blockchain, being used in the agricultural production. So this is one of the trends that, we are seeing in terms of agricultural production. In terms of mass consumption, these are the trends that we see besides increasing the quality. There is also a trend about, optimization of transformation processes. And there is also a need to adapt the quality in face of aging and modern diseases. And there is also a trend of, the need for cost control. Of course, we need cost control. If not, the products will be too expensive, for the end consumers. And we're also talking about, optimization of logistics. And there is also a trend of, having a meal delivery being, optimized as well. And of course, as I cited earlier, the fight against food waste. This is a very growing trend in Asian, particularly coming in Singapore. And consumers are also, demanding of a better way of using less packaging, in the food products received or in the meals that they receive. So how about tomorrow? So here are some alternatives that we can see for the new tomorrow. So genetic engineering. So there is a need due to climate changes. As you can see, nowadays the climate is changing rapidly. And there are needs, for some foods, to be more climate resilient, so that they can still produce in this harsh climate. For example, it could be, like a heat, a very hot country, getting hotter and hotter, and there are less crops. So we need to have crops which are more, like genetically engineered. And there are some food alternatives that we have not eaten, but it's possible. Insects, algae, they can be food alternatives to the usual food, that we eat today. And of course, urban agriculture, particularly for Singapore, which Jacqueline will, say it more later, which is very important. Instead of growing in big fields, grow inside, a factory, grow inside a car park, or even like vertically up will be ways, to optimize the yield and the growth, for the farmers. And of course, funding and investment, which, Jacqueline would also like talk more later. So I hope that I've given you, a very panorama view of, the stakes and trends in ASEAN. I'm here to, to be of connection to you guys. And if you have any questions later on after the webinar, you can always contact me via my email. Okay, I would like to pass on the floor to Jacqueline, who will talk to us more about, Singapore and the strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. And yes, Jacqueline, the mic is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Aude. Good afternoon to those in Singapore, and very good morning to those who are in France, like I am. I'm Jacqueline, and I'm the Regional Director in Europe for the Economic Development Board of Singapore. And I'm very happy here today to share with you the opportunities in the agri-food sector in Singapore. Next, please. Maybe useful for me to say a few words on who we are. The Economic Development Board of Singapore, or EDB for short, is the government agency that's responsible for Singapore's economic and industrial development strategies. We undertake investment promotion and industry development work to enhance Singapore's position as an international business hub. We're today responsible for over 30% of Singapore's annual GDP across manufacturing and tradable services sectors. Next, please. Now, with all the introductions in place, let's get into the topic of the day, which is agri-food. Singapore's vision is to become a global agri-food hub. Now, what does that mean and why? So agri-food has become a very important topic, not just for us, but also for cities and countries around the world. And Wendy has just talked quite a bit about it, because the way that the world feeds itself is changing and will continue to change. I mean, due to things like population growth, climate change, growing food safety concerns, and things like that. And of course, COVID has also highlighted the need to really rethink the global food supply chains. At the same time, consumers from all over the world are also changing the way they choose to consume. Many are making decisions based on ethical considerations, environmental sustainability concerns that did not exist in the past. Next, please. The way Singapore is consuming must also change. Today, we're very heavily dependent on food import. In fact, we import about 90% of the food that we eat. This is because we don't have a lot of agricultural land. This model of consumption, as you can imagine, is unsustainable. In the beginning of the pandemic, for example, many borders were shut, making it difficult to import food. On top of that, I mean, the day-to-day transportation of food products also contributes to carbon emissions, which we are working very hard to cut. As a city, we're thinking of new ways to feed ourselves. Firstly, we're diversifying our import sources to make sure that we're not over-reliant on a few. Secondly, we want to grow more locally. Today, we produce about 12,000 tons of vegetables on about 100 hectares of farmland, right? So with new technology, we can produce 1,000 tons per hectare, and it doesn't even need to be on farmland. It can be in city spaces like rooftops, car parks, etc. So we decided to set ourselves the ambitious goal of producing 30% of the food that we consume by year 2030, a goal that we call 30 by 30, which some of you might have heard. To do this, we will rely on technology. Finally, it is about supporting food products in Singapore, food producers in Singapore, in expanding and growing overseas so that their produce can be imported back home. Next, please. Of all the emerging agri-food technologies that are out there, Singapore has chosen to focus on three major groups, which are urban agriculture, aquaculture, and alternative protein. We have chosen these because they are efficient, they're productive, and also sustainable, and therefore a good fit for an urban city like Singapore. Urban agriculture, for example, challenges the idea, like Wendy said, that farming needs to be done horizontally and to take up a lot of land. With the use of technologies like IoT, automation, control environmental systems, we can turn farming vertical and put them into urban spaces to produce more food with less resources. Aquaculture is a very efficient way of producing protein. You get 1 kilo of protein for each kilo of feed you enter into the equation. This compares with the 7 kilo of feed that's required to produce 1 kilo of beef, for example. And when it comes to alternative proteins, we are looking at technologies that could replace animal farming altogether, such as plant-based, microbial, or cultured meat. Next, please. Well, Singapore is not a traditional agricultural country, but we're innovation oriented, we like technology, and we are starting off with a good foundation of capabilities in specialty chemicals, biologics, energy and waste management, as well as automation and robotics. On our journey, we're starting to see some early successes in attracting a diverse range of partners into our ecosystem. You can see here the ecosystem along the value chain of farm to fork. We have on one end chemical companies like Evonik, which manufactures methionine in Singapore, Bayer and Syngenta, which have their R&D centers for plant science in Singapore. We have a growing number of high-tech farms in Singapore like Verti Veggies, Panasonic, and agri-commodity traders like Olam, Cargill. And at the very downstream, we're becoming a hub for food products. Companies like Coca-Cola, Mondelez, Danone use Singapore as their regional commercial hub and use their innovate and also produce here. The flavors and fragrances and specialty ingredients makers, I mean like Rocket, which support the consumer food companies in their formulations and development, also have the Asian Innovation Center here in Singapore. Next, please. While existing players in the ecosystem continues to grow and expand and new ones come in as well, for alternative proteins, we've welcomed Eat Just, an American producer of meat and egg substitute. Eat Just was set up its regional headquarters and production facility in Singapore. The company partners private equity firm Proterra Investments, which will pull in about 80 million euros. Eat Just will then invest up to 16 million euros on its own. As you might have already heard, Singapore is the first country in the world to have approved the sale of lab-grown meat. This will open up avenues of opportunities for players like us to bring their products to market. Another one that I want to give special mention to is End Ever from Germany, which is setting up a mega farm and its global R&D center in Singapore. They will collaborate with partners in Singapore, such as A-Star, sorry about that, our national research agency, on topics such as energy consumption reduction, yield optimization. The farm will be able to produce up to 500 tons of vegetables per year without pesticide, using 90% less water and 60% less fertilizers. Next, please. So what we're going to do to accelerate the growth in this sector, we have put in place national initiatives like the Agrifood Innovation Park, which will be built on 18-hectare plot of land and serve as a reference site for high-tech farming operations to test their technologies and explore synergies across the value chain. The government also announced 144 million, which is about 90 million euros, Singapore Food Story R&D program to bring together our public research institutes, industry partners to solve agri-food challenges in areas such as sustainable urban food production and biotech protein production. Several grant calls have already been launched since 2019. Next, please. Besides national level initiatives, there are other important enablers within our agri-food sector. Whether you're looking for funding or investment targets, we have in Singapore a very vibrant ecosystem for you. We also see more and more ideas being born out of Singapore and then co-innovation partners formed in the space of agri-food. We've also invested heavily in building up public sector R&D capabilities and set up several institutes and programs that are dedicated to the research, development, and testing for agri-food, such as the Singapore Institute for Food and Biotechnology for those in the alternative protein space, the Aquaculture Innovation Center for those in the aquaculture space, and the High Performance Precision and Agriculture Program for urban farmers looking to test plant recipes in indoor growing spaces. All of these institutes form partnerships with private sector partners. Those in Singapore can also benefit from shared infrastructure like extrusion, pilot plant, test kitchens. They're housed within our research institutes or partner companies. Finally, I imagine that actual going to market to be something that is really on everyone's mind, especially for those who are new to Asia or startups that may not have a lot of resources on the ground just yet. SATS is one of the largest food services companies in Singapore, and we've partnered them to build a go-to-market platform for alternative protein companies from all over the world using SATS sourcing and distribution network in Singapore. Next, please. So let's see how EDB can help. First, you have our website and social media pages that provide business insights, industry overviews, a calendar of events like this one, including this one, that could be useful and interesting to you, practical information like how you can set up in Singapore, how much it costs to set up in Singapore. This content on our website is constantly being updated, and we're constantly creating new content as well, so make sure to check in. At the end of the presentation, I will flash a QR code which you can follow to subscribe to our newsletter. Next, please. You're also, of course, welcome to speak to us directly. You're welcome to connect with me directly. We'd like to hear from you about what you're working on, why Asia is interesting to you, and how Singapore may be able to support you on your growth journey. You can ask us questions or ask that we connect you with accelerators, with public research institutes, like some of those that I mentioned. We may be able to direct you also to government programs that could support you in setting up headquarter operations, your R&D center, and even your manufacturing facilities and so on. Next, please. So here I've come to the end of my presentation. I will give you guys a few seconds to just kind of scan the QR code to follow us on our newsletters, and then I'll hand over to Damien Pierre. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. Very nice and detailed presentation, I would say. I would like just to remind our audience to use the toolbox to ask questions, and we will answer them at the end of the presentations. So Damien Pierre, the screen is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So now thanks for Wendy and Jacqueline to give an overview. I will give a view from the industry itself inside this ecosystem, I will say. So next page, just a quick word on Rocket, who we are. We are processing agricultural raw material, which are corn, wheat, potato, pea, or cellulose, and we are transforming it into ingredients for the food, nutrition, and pharmaceutical industry. Quite a big turnover, above 3 billion euro, initially, and still a French family-owned company, but with a presence everywhere and more than 55 industrial sites. So on next page, as Jacqueline was saying, there are a few items where Singapore is playing. There is urban farming, there are the aquaculture and alternative protein. For Rocket, we are at the heart of the alternative protein, long experience in plant protein. And nowadays we are really pushing our strong expertise in the pea protein for the food and the health market. I think you can click on the few things. So several plants in Europe, one coming up starting in Canada. Strong management on the raw material, the protein offer, the service. Next page. So a few words on the consumer, and then we'll talk about the Singapore. So a few words consumer. Wendy was explaining, showing a few things on the trend here. I would say, to my experience, Asia is always a bit late compared to Europe and US. Obviously, usually starting in US, then going to Europe, then going to Asia. But really, it's kicking up in the last years. And what consumers are really looking in Asia is something which is healthier and something which is better for the planet. And never forget that taste is a primary concern. So which claim did you prefer? Now we have 50% of the population which is saying, I want something plant-based. And plant-based is really something they start to know, and also on the high protein. And if you see on the next page is nowadays, this is the number of new launch with plant protein. Really, Asia is growing at a faster pace than global. So still behind in some cases. And as Wendy was saying, Southeast Asia is a very diverse set of countries, but really picking up. So protein deficit, we know that. And Asia for us is really the second most active region. The growth we have seen is 3% higher than the global. So based on that, on the next page, every single country now is not every single, but some countries are putting up a plant protein ecosystem. France has a plant protein strategy starting in 2020. Canada has a protein industry cluster. Netherlands has a protein strategy with their food valley, and Jacqueline was saying by Singapore, a 30 by 30 food security target. And on those ecosystem, everybody is playing or decided where to play, from the seed to the raw material to the ingredient when Rocket is, to the finished product and distribution. And in the same time, every single stage, you have a multinational company, small and middle-sized enterprise, and also startup, which are coming up. And we can say that the startup are really shaking the whole system, which is good. Needed to be shaken for the last decades. All of this value chain, in a way, ecosystem is backed up by government in different places, by technical center, incubator, or investor. So this is what we see, I will say, at the global level from my seat. On the next page, if we sit in Singapore only as today, for me, is one of the 4 ecosystem I mentioned previously. This is the most active. This is the most active, and there are a few reasons for that. One reason is the number of consumers which are flexitarian, so not only eating meat, but mixing plant-based meat, which is close to 40%. If you take a number, it's less than 20 in France. One of the good parts, I will say, it's extremely high proportion of eating out. You have 55% of the Singaporean which are eating out weekly in a restaurant, in food court, etc. Where is less than 10% in Europe, in France. And this is extremely important because you can see that most, I will say most, but a lot of those new plant protein or alternative protein space are testing the market in the food service before going to consumer most of the time. And this is a good test market. The other part, I will say, it's a very cohesive market. So Jacqueline showed it. It has been for years in Singapore a big R&D center from technical, private universities or big multinational, and there's good base, I will say, enabled to have more technical center, good number of incubator, a lot of investor, and a tremendous number of startup. So cannot say that there is more of those here than in France or Netherlands and Canada, but it's more cohesive. It's more centralized. The country is a bit smaller, so it's less spread around, more concentrated, and everybody is a bit helping each other or reach out. Or okay, you need a pilot, you need a formulation, you go there. You need a scale up. Where do you go? You need to do subcontracting. Who knows what, etc. So this is really working here. And as a result, the investment in alternative protein has been multiplied by 6 last year versus 2019, versus multiplied by 3 in the rest of the globe. So don't have the number yet for 2021, but it will be more than multiplied by 6. It will be tremendous. So based on all that, my personal opinion, I will say, as a rocket hat, but as also a personal hat, on the next page is I do believe that Singapore is very well positioned to be the food tech capital of Asia. Strong ecosystem, good place, strong knowledge, good help from government and the rest, good test market, to be a hub to go in other places. Is in a nutshell on the last page, I will say what us as Rocket we are working in this journey or in this ecosystem and in this value chain. So we do work in the field because getting raw material, in a way, it's not that difficult, but getting them in significant quantity and good quality and stable quality is really a challenge. So we do have some partner on the seed improvement or collaboration, for example, in Europe or in Canada. Developing the sustainable agri-chain, development of the organic, for example, pea in Canada, it's everything we do now from scratch. On the protein side, we aim to have a dual extraction close to raw material and also close to the main market. Having a large range, make sure that these products are tested and safe. And also on the table part, helping our customer, which are food manufacturer, to develop their own recipe and especially adapted to local, regional, new cuisine. I mean, the format has really very large now, and I think innovation and ideas there is no frontier. So I will be happy to take a few questions.
Thank you very much, Damien Pierre, for this very interesting presentation. I suggest that we now start the Q&A session. So please feel free again to leave your questions in the toolbox. I can see that we have actually, oh no, they're all answered, but maybe I do have a question. I mean, this is a question from Olivia. What are the key challenges for a French company to set up an affiliate and or an industrial site in Singapore? So maybe a question for Jacqueline, perhaps.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Thanks for the question. I think the challenges kind of differ from company to company, also the sector that you're in, the stage of maturity that you are in, and looking at Asia as a potential market, looking at Singapore. But I would generally say that for a lot of the companies I've interacted with, right, it may seem intimidating to kind of navigate a very, very diverse and very fragmented region, which is Southeast Asia or the broader Asia Pacific, because the consumer preferences are so different, the market dynamics are so different. But I think this is why I think Singapore kind of, places ourselves in the center of everything. We call ourselves a hub because we can help you to access, kind of understand the different markets from where we are, right? So there are professional services companies. I mean, of course, there are great partners like, FCCS to help you to get a sense for where everything stands, to get a sense on how you can take your first 2 steps on navigating the region through Singapore. So that's that. And also, I think there's just a lot of information flying everywhere. There are webinars. There are also a lot of websites telling you one thing or another. So I think, again, I echo the thing that I said earlier, which is to go to our website. I mean, we have quite a bit of information there. What I will also send to you in the chat box is also this link to a very nice initiative that some of my colleagues at EDB have started, which is called the Investment Clinic. On this website, you can see that there are bite-sized video courses that you can just watch anytime on your own. Things like, how do you set up in Singapore? I mean, FCCS has done a video for us on that one. And also, how do you navigate the startup ecosystem in Singapore? How do you put together a team in Singapore? How do you find investment in Singapore and things like that? So that could be a really nice starting point to kind of start to navigate some of these. And then you can send us questions. You can reach out to FCCS if you have any specific questions pertaining to your operations. And then I guess a final word on setting up industrial operations, right? So we are a manufacturing country, even though we are very small. Manufacturing is very, very important to us. And so we have dedicated quite a bit of resources. We plan our strategies years ahead on how we want to, zone our lands and things like that. So talk to us if you're thinking of manufacturing in Singapore. We may not have a lot of, vast industrial land for you to look at, but we do have purpose-built facilities that could be quite suited to agri-food production, because you high value production, you may not need a huge lot of space. So speak to us directly if you have interest in that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. And EDB and FCCS are very close partners. Yeah. A question for Damien Pierre. So according to you, how good or bad does the COVID-19 impact the sector, and more precisely your activities here in Singapore and in the region, or even in the rest of the world? If you can tell us a few words about it, maybe.
Yeah, I think, yes, thank you. I think there was a different phase, pretty hit by the lockdown in every country at the beginning, because there was a massive stop on the food service sales on our side. I mean, all the restaurants and were closed. And so we've seen a very strong shift from so our customer doing food service going from 100 to 0 in a couple of days, and people who are making food for the retailer are going from 100 to 150% also in a couple of days. So the biggest challenge at the beginning, even there was an overall drop in demand, was mostly the supply, basically can the logistic chain and supply chain cope with that? And we successfully did. There are every region, every countries, every market segment is recovering differently, but I will say most of them are recovering. And this year the demand is quite high. I will say very high, and the challenge is to supply the quantity. Needed to be very flexible, because from one month to the other during the whole 1 year and a half changed dramatically.
Okay. Thank you, Damien Pierre. Wendy or Jacqueline, would you like to add anything, maybe?
Maybe I can talk about, like French companies, approaching Singapore, approaching French Chamber, in terms of, requirement for business connection. I think for us, we had a bit of like a change in the format, because previously we are so used to having a physical meetings, and now we are all converted to digital. At first, from the French side, there were a bit of resistance, because they are not so used to this kind of format. They prefer, to come to Singapore to meet directly with the Singapore importers. They prefer to establish a physical kind of like a relationship, in terms of face-to-face. But due to the COVID, because they can't come to Singapore, so therefore they have to come to, French Chamber and ask us for help. So we do give help to French companies for business connections, even for market studies, even for, checking the retailer shop. How is the, the range of products getting on from from stores to stores. So we do have, a lot of requests, especially for my food department, from the, French food companies. The demand is like times 2, times 3. It's so much for my food department. So it's a very good COVID effect for Agrifood tech department in the Team France Expo. Yeah.
Thank you, Wendy.
Yes.
I don't see any more question in the chat. So I have a last question for Wendy.
Yeah.
You were talking about the shift of the agri-food industry, so in ASEAN towards a more innovative sector and so on. But I assume that there are huge discrepancies, huge differences between emerging countries like Myanmar, for example, and developed countries like Singapore. Could you maybe just give us like a little bit more insights about it, and
Yes.
where are the differences?
Yes, of course. Yeah. If you look at the whole ASEAN region, it's quite big. So if you look at Singapore, Singapore is really small. It's just a small dot, in the planet. You cannot even see it on the map. So in terms of the surface available for agriculture, you have like big places like Thailand, Myanmar, Laos, lots of lands, for agriculture. But if you're Singapore, it's very small. We practically have nothing for agriculture. So in terms of the needs wise, so you see that, there's two different, it's very, very, how do you say, very extreme. But in terms of the technology used, because Singapore is very small, as what Jacqueline said, we need technology to help us to grow a lot of food in such a limited area. Whereas in, countries like Myanmar, Laos, Vietnam, Thailand, they have a lot of land. Manpower is cheap, so they don't mind to spend, to engage a lot of manpower. They don't need much in terms of technology, because the manpower is very, very, how do you say, very cheaply available there. Whereas in Singapore, the cost of labor is very high. So you definitely have two different extremes, and so probably two different kinds of like solutions, for various countries. So more technological needs for Singapore, whereas for Asian countries like Myanmar, Laos, it could be a little more technology, but also to help them to increase yields, which is going to be very useful. As we can see, by 2030, we have so much demand, but we don't have enough, optimum yields to satisfy this demand. So I hope that this can explain, the various, viewpoint between Singapore and the rest of the countries. Yeah.
Thank you, Wendy. I can see another question in the chat. So, are there any challenges to establish your headquarters and R&D in Singapore while producing and mainly targeting the rest of Southeast Asia? I guess Damien, Pierre, or Jacqueline.
Yeah, maybe I can take it. So this is exactly what we do. It is possible. There are, I will say, a current challenges with COVID-19 restriction to travel. But hopefully this will not last for years. And having here the headquarters and the R&D in Singapore, as I say, you have great support and great ecosystem, and the production in another country, it's definitely possible.
Thank you, Damien, Pierre. Jacqueline, would you like maybe to say a few words?
I think this question's come from Nicholas from InnovaFeed. We're very familiar, we're in touch. So I think we've had a few exchanges. So I thought it was good for Damien Pierre to kind of give that industry perspective. I think that's another question though, and I think that I could take that is in the chat, which is about dairy products and, dairy milk powders, whey, cheeses, and things like that. So I just want to highlight that. I mean, when we talk about milk powder, right? So Singapore has manufacturers that produce an infant formula today. So you think about Nestle, Mead Johnson, Abbott, all do their manufacturing in Singapore, and they've been here for a very long time, right? So, I mean, one reason is because IP protection, and I think that's the case for high value food products where IP is extremely important. And I think in Singapore, we really pride ourselves for having very strong IP regimens for that. So if you're thinking of producing, very IP sensitive products, I mean, certain types of high value whey protein, for example, Singapore could be the place for you. And also another concern, of course, when it comes to this kind of food products, especially when it's health-related products or when it's given to children, for example, then food safety is indeed another concern, which is why these manufacturers that I mentioned have chosen Singapore, because they feel that we have a very strong, food safety standards. They are very highly enforced. And of course, a high degree of things like automation and things like that has also allowed us to reduce that human intervention factor when it comes to producing food. So yes, dairy products and all that, especially high value products, continue to be important to us and continue to happen in Singapore. So if that's what you're thinking and you're interested, come talk to us about the specific product you're thinking to produce, and then we can work from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. We don't have any more questions. So then unless Jacqueline, sorry, Wendy or Damien Pierre, you have maybe a last word to say. Otherwise, I suggest that we just say bye. And do you have anything else? Sorry, to add? Any more last question?
No, just to say that what we are all experiencing in the agri-food never happened in the last 50 years, so it's very exciting.
Yeah. Thank you for these last words, Damien Pierre, and I completely agree with you. Yeah. So our webinar comes to its end. Thank you very much to our speakers, so Wendy, Jacqueline, and Damien Pierre, for sharing all these key insights with us today. Thank you as well to our attendees. I hope this webinar was useful. And the last few words to tell you that the French Chamber organizes many other events in the coming weeks. So please feel free to visit our website and check what could be of interest to you. Thank you again for your time. And I wish you all a good day or a nice evening, and take care. Thank you very much.